The room was almost silent. Only the low hum of machinery and the soft glow of a radar screen cut through the darkness inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Lexington. On that calm June morning in 1944, a single fighter direction officer watched thin green traces move steadily across the scope, each one a distant aircraft crossing the Philippine Sea. He could not see the enemy with his eyes, but he could read every intention written in those drifting blips. 69 Japanese planes were coming straight for the American fleet, still unaware that they were already exposed. Above the ocean, the Japanese pilots believed they were flying a familiar mission: locate the carriers, dive fast, hit hard, and return home. They trusted their training, their courage, and the doctrine that had carried the Imperial Navy through years of war. What they did not know was that another kind of warfare was unfolding below them, in a darkened room where information had become a weapon. One question lingered over that radar plot, a question that still echoes today. When a single system can guide dozens of F6F Hellcats into perfect position, what chance does individual skill truly have? 2 years before those green blips appeared on the Lexington's radar screen, the United States Navy had learned a painful truth at Midway. In 1942, American carriers fought bravely but blindly. Radar sets were primitive, communication across the task force was fragmented, and fighter direction relied on intuition rather than information. Pilots launched into the sky with only partial understanding of what awaited them. Ships burned not because their crews lacked courage, but because the Navy lacked a system capable of positioning its defenders at the critical moment. That failure marked the beginning of a transformation. Admiral Chester Nimitz and his staff studied what had gone wrong. They examined British experiments with radar-controlled interceptions, reviewed every missed communication, and rebuilt the doctrine of carrier defense from its foundations. In late 1942, Tactical Bulletin 4 terabytes 4.2 standardized fighter direction procedures across the Pacific Fleet. 2 months later, Admiral Ernest King gave a name to the new nerve center, the Combat Information Center. What emerged was not a single invention, but a framework, a way of combining radar detection, plotting, and real-time command into one integrated process. By early 1944, every major American carrier had a dedicated CIC staffed with trained radar operators, grease pencil plotters, and fighter direction officers who understood how to turn raw signals into tactical decisions. The CIC no longer reacted to the enemy. It anticipated him. The system was tested for the first time on the 11th of June 1944 over Saipan. Task Force 58 launched a massive strike, and Japanese fighters rose to meet it. They expected a chaotic aerial contest. Instead, they found F6F Hellcats waiting at precise altitudes and headings, positioned not by luck, but by radar-directed fighter control. 4 days later, a small group of Japanese torpedo planes approached from Guam. American radar detected them at 80 miles. Hellcats intercepted before the attackers ever saw the carriers. 6 planes fell, 1 fled, none reached the fleet. These encounters left Japanese pilots unsettled. The Americans seemed to appear from nowhere, perfectly placed, as if guided by knowledge no human eye could provide. What the Japanese could not know was that they were no longer fighting individual pilots. They were fighting a system that could track every movement from the moment an aircraft lifted off the runway. By mid-June 1944, the strategic stage was set. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa commanded 9 Japanese carriers, more than 400 carrier aircraft, and expected the support of 300 land-based planes from Guam, Rota, and Tinian. His plan was grounded in confidence, superior range, a vast battle space, and the belief that American defenses would be overwhelmed by simultaneous attacks from multiple directions. Across the sea, Admiral Raymond Spruance and Admiral Mark Mitcher prepared for the blow. American submarines had already sighted Ozawa's fleet. Codebreakers had deciphered Japanese intentions. Fighter direction teams across Task Force 58 waited inside their darkened CICs, knowing that when the attack came, information would move faster than steel. And so, on the morning of June 19, the first traces of the Japanese strike appeared on the radar scopes. A battle was coming, one shaped not by chance encounters in the sky, but by the system that watched everything. When the first Japanese formation appeared as a tight cluster on the transparent plotting board Inside the Lexington's Combat Information Center, the room seemed to grow even quieter. The fighter direction officer stood behind the plotters, watching the marks slide eastward across the glass. Hellcats were already airborne, on routine combat air patrol, scattered across miles of sky and layered altitudes. Now they needed to become a single, coordinated weapon. The process unfolded with practiced precision. Radar operators called out range and bearing. Plotters marked each update in grease pencil. The fighter director calculated the intercept geometry, the angle of approach, the altitude advantage, the moment when speed and timing would converge. Then came the instructions, calm and clipped over VHF radio. Turn left heading 270, climb to Angels 18. Bogey bearing 295, range 60 miles. Every pilot heard the same steady voice. Raid 1. 17 minutes that changed everything. 69 Japanese aircraft approached in disciplined formation. Zeros, dive bombers, and torpedo planes moving toward the distant shapes of American carriers. They believed the combat air patrol would be somewhere near the fleet, orbiting without precise guidance. Instead, the F6F Hellcats began to gather at a single point 70 miles west of the task force, exactly where the intercept needed to occur. At 10:23, the lead division reported visual contact. Bandits high, 12 o'clock. The fighter director issued the command. Tally-ho. Execute. Hellcats dropped their noses and dove through the thin morning air. They hit from above and ahead, the perfect attacking position. The Japanese formation fractured instantly. Pilots who tried to turn and fight found the sky already filled with American aircraft. Within minutes, 42 enemy planes were down. The survivors fled or plunged into disarray. Not one reached the American carriers. Raid 2. A system repeats its pattern. Barely had the last echoes of Raid 1 faded when radar screens lit again. 109 aircraft approaching from the northwest. The Essex Group took the primary intercept, with Lexington and Bunker Hill launching additional fighters. Many Hellcats from the first engagement remained airborne and were immediately revectored. The Japanese maintained perfect doctrinal discipline, straight flight, steady altitude, no evasive maneuvers. Doctrine assumed an enemy without situational awareness. It had served them well in 1942. It doomed them in 1944. American fighters met the formation 60 miles from the fleet. 70 Japanese aircraft fell. The few that pressed on were shot down by anti-aircraft fire or forced into the sea. Again, no carrier was struck. Raid 3 and Raid 4, the breaking point. The third wave, 47 aircraft from the north, encountered Hellcats almost as soon as they crossed radar range. 7 went down. The rest abandoned the attack rather than fly into another invisible trap. The fourth wave never found the fleet. Low on fuel, stressed and disoriented, they turned toward Guam. 27 American fighters intercepted them over Orote Field as they circled to land. 30 Japanese planes were shot down. Others were destroyed on the ground. By late afternoon, the sky belonged entirely to the Americans. In a single day, more than 300 Japanese aircraft disappeared from the war. And for all the chaos above the sea, the victory had been scripted somewhere else in the calm glow of a radar screen. Turning points and consequences. Carriers lost, air crews gone, and a future unraveled. Even as American fighter directors shattered wave after wave above the Philippine Sea, a quieter but equally decisive struggle was unfolding beneath the surface. At 8:16 that same morning, the submarine USS Albacore sighted the Japanese flagship Taiho. With no time to set a perfect firing solution, the captain ordered a hasty spread of torpedoes. 6 left the tubes. One of them would intersect with fate. Warrant Officer Sakio Kamatsu, who had just lifted off in a Yokosuka dive bomber, saw the torpedo wake slicing toward his carrier. In a moment that captured the fierce devotion of Japanese naval aviators, he rolled out of formation and dove straight at the nearest torpedo. His aircraft struck the warhead and vanished in a single blast. He died instantly. The torpedo was destroyed, but another found its mark. Taiho's starboard tanks ruptured, filling compartments with invisible, volatile vapor. At first, the damage appeared manageable. Taiho continued flight operations while engineers investigated the spreading fumes. Then came the fatal decision. Increase ventilation to clear the decks. Instead, the system carried fuel vapor throughout the ship. Hours later, a spark no one knew from where triggered an explosion that ripped through the carrier from the inside. Fires raced through passageways. By late afternoon, Taiho's fate was sealed. More than 1,500 crewmen perished as she sank beneath the sea. Not far away, another giant was dying. USS Kavala had found Shokaku, a veteran of Pearl Harbor and Coral Sea. 3 torpedoes struck home. The carrier erupted in towering sheets of flame. Her crew fought the fires bravely, but aviation fuel feeding the blaze made survival impossible. By mid-afternoon, Shokaku rolled and disappeared. 887 sailors went with her. The sky had already taken Japan's air arm. Now the sea claimed its ships. These losses compounded a crisis Japan could not solve. Before the war, the Imperial Navy had trained roughly 3,500 highly skilled carrier pilots. By June 1944, fewer than 1,000 remained. Wartime shortages forced training programs to shrink from 2 years to a few months. Fuel was scarce, flight hours minimal. Inexperienced air crews faced veteran American pilots flying the F6F Hellcat, directed with mathematical precision by radar-linked fighter control. The outcome was tragically predictable. On June 20, the Americans went on the offensive. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher ordered a long-range evening strike on the retreating Japanese fleet, knowing aircraft would need to return in darkness with little fuel to spare. It was a bold decision driven by opportunity. The attack succeeded, but the return was harrowing. Pilots ditched in the dark, some crashing into the sea, others missing their carriers entirely. Then Mitcher issued one of the most remembered commands of the war: turn on the lights. Across the Pacific, Task Force 58 lit itself like a floating city, navigation lights, searchlights, signal lamps blazing in the night. It violated every rule of wartime discipline, yet it saved lives. One by one, pilots found their way home. By the end of June 19 and 20, Japan had lost more than aircraft and carriers. It had lost the core of its naval aviation and the ability to contest the Pacific. The turning point had arrived not with a single blow, but through the cumulative weight of a system the Japanese could neither see nor counter. From the American side, the Battle of the Philippine Sea revealed a truth that had been taking shape since Midway. Victory in modern warfare would belong not merely to the nation with better weapons, but to the nation that could integrate those weapons into a coherent system. The F6F Hellcat was a rugged and capable fighter, and American pilots were superbly trained, yet neither would have achieved such dominance without radar-directed fighter control. Inside each combat information center, information moved with purpose, linking detection, communication, and execution into one seamless chain. The result was a defensive architecture that no Japanese formation could penetrate. For Japan, the contrast was devastating. The Imperial Navy possessed skilled aviators, gifted engineers, and even radar of its own. But its carriers remained isolated from one another in practice. Each ship tracked its own contacts. Each directed its own fighters. Doctrine emphasized individual initiative, an admirable trait in the cockpit, but a fatal flaw when facing a force that operated as a unified whole. In 1941, such methods had been effective. By 1944, they were hopelessly outdated. Japanese leaders recognized the American advantage too late and lacked the industrial capacity or organizational framework to replicate it before their air arm collapsed. Strategically, the consequences rippled far beyond the Philippine Sea. With Japanese naval aviation shattered, the American advance across the Pacific accelerated. Saipan fell on July 9, Tinian on August 1, Guam on August 10. The Marianas became the forward base for B-29 bombers that would soon strike the Japanese homeland directly. The illusion of a possible Japanese victory dissolved. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo resigned less than a month after the carrier disaster, an implicit acknowledgement that Japan's strategic position had become untenable. Globally, militaries took notice. After the war, every major navy adopted some form of centralized air defense coordination, modeled on the American CIC. The Soviet Union developed its own systems. The Royal Navy refined its early radar techniques. NATO built doctrine around integrated detection and intercept control. Modern battle networks, Aegis, airborne early warning aircraft, linked command centers, can trace their lineage back to the principles proven in June 1944. In the Philippine Sea, the United States demonstrated that information, properly gathered and properly used, could outperform courage, range, and even numbers. It was a shift in the nature of warfare itself, and the world would never fight the same way again. When we return to that darkened combat information center aboard the USS Lexington, we can almost see the silhouettes of the officers studying the glowing radar scopes. No medals, no glory, just steady hands and quiet concentration. Their names were rarely recorded, their actions seldom celebrated, yet the outcome of the Battle of the Philippine Sea rested on their ability to transform raw data into precise direction. While F6F Hellcats carved arcs across the sky, the true architecture of victory was being drawn in grease pencil on a transparent board. That contrast remains one of the enduring lessons of June 1944. Japanese naval aviation possessed extraordinary courage and a tradition of disciplined flying. Warrant Officer Sakio Kamatsu's sacrifice, diving his aircraft into the path of a torpedo to protect Taiho, reflects a level of devotion few warriors in any era could match. But courage alone could not overcome a system built on integration. Radar-directed fighter control did not just guide airplanes. It reshaped the battlefield. It turned information into power. It ensured that American fighters met every threat at the perfect place and the perfect time. This is why the Battle of the Philippine Sea stands not only as a tactical triumph, but as a turning point in modern warfare. The United States demonstrated that when detection, communication, and coordinated action converge, the result is overwhelming. Japan's doctrine, forged in an earlier era of visual sighting and individual initiative, simply could not keep pace. In the end, the F6F Hellcat was more than a superior fighter. It was the visible edge of an invisible system that could see farther, react faster, and strike with certainty. The legacy extends well beyond 1944. Every combat information center on every modern warship, every integrated battle network, every airborne early warning aircraft carrying the watch today traces its lineage back to those early experiments in the Pacific. The principles proven in the Philippine Sea still guide navies around the world. See the threat first, share the picture, act as one. And so we ask a final question, one that reaches beyond history. What do we learn when an entire system proves stronger than individual skill? For many viewers, especially those who have served or known someone who has, this story is more than a record of victory. It is a reminder that discipline, training, and coordination can shape the fate of nations. If this battle speaks to you, if the story of the Philippine Sea, the F6F Hellcat, and the Combat Information Center reminds you of someone you knew or something you learned, share your thoughts below. And if you want to keep exploring the lessons that history still holds for us, consider subscribing so we can continue this journey together.